They said I wasn't on the list. Not for the family seats, not in the procession, not even in the printed program. The woman in the red clipboard jacket smiled with polite confusion as she flipped through pages. "Are you sure you're here for Colonel Owens's Medal of Valor ceremony?" I looked at her once, gently, without blinking. Yes. He was my father, but I didn't fight her. I didn't plead for a seat. I've faced worse than this at 0400 in desert dust storms. I've waited 6 hours in sub-zero wind for a target who never showed. I've burned through intel briefings where every man in the room forgot I was fluent in the language they were mocking. No, I didn't fight her. I just stepped back and waited for the sky. There's a particular silence that blankets Arlington before a flyover. Civilians don't know it, but we do. The shift in air pressure, the minor scurry of security, the sharp, trained eyes that begin to scan the horizon, and the sound that rises not in decibels, but in memory. Every operation I ever commanded had that silence before contact, so I stood in my regulation-pressed service dress, with no seat, no name tag, no smile from my mother, and I waited. For the moment they couldn't ignore, 3 black SUVs pulled up behind the main audience rows, and that's when the murmurs started. I heard my brother's voice low, annoyed. "What the hell is going on?" And then the blades, like judgment from above. The Pentagon didn't send a car for me. They sent a Black Hawk, landed 200 yards off the ceremony green. Men in dark suits formed a line. A flag bearer dismounted first, then my escort. Not military police, not some low-level intern. It was General Thorne, head of Joint Special Operations Command, my father's old war buddy, the one who used to slap me on the head when I visited the base as a child. Now he stood ramrod straight, saluted me, and said, "Commander Owens, your presence was requested at the highest level," and only then did the woman with the red clipboard start stuttering. Only then did the whisper ripple across the neatly pressed civilian rows. Who is she? They didn't know, because no one in my family had told them. Because to them, I was just the daughter who left. You know the type, don't you? The one they say is too cold, too distant, too ambitious. The girl who missed Christmas because she was somewhere in Asia and refused to explain why. The woman they quietly resent, because she didn't ask for their approval. And in my family, that was a sin worse than failure. My mother wore her signature pale blue suit that day, the same one she wore to church when she needed to signal grace under fire. Her pearls rested gently against her throat, but her eyes tightened when I passed her row. She didn't move, didn't even shift her handbag. I walked past her like she was marble, like I'd walked past 1,000 silent statues before. You ever feel like a stranger among people who carry your blood, like they know your face, but never once bothered to learn your soul? That was me. That's always been me, until the uniform forced them to see what they couldn't erase. I took my place on stage, between generals. My seat bore no name tag. It didn't need one. The announcer paused, adjusted his mic, and said something that I still remember. Verbatim. "Joining us is Commander Eliza Owens, Naval Intelligence, Black Operations Liaison, Pentagon Clearance Level 9 recipient of the Cross for Strategic Bravery." I didn't look at my brother then, or my mother, or the cousins who used to joke that I was probably working at a DMV in some other state. I kept my gaze on the flag, and still, somewhere inside, the little girl in me waited for anyone to recognize me, to remember that I used to stand in this man's shadow. That once, long ago, he lifted me onto his shoulders after a neighborhood parade, that I watched him iron his medals, that I stayed up late to hear his stories, even when I didn't understand a word. My father, Colonel David Owens, he lay in that casket now, folded flag across his chest, given full honors, Gun salute, horse-drawn caisson, all of it. But he'd left no mention of me in his obituary. Not one. Not survived by his daughter. Not Commander Eliza Owens. Just silence. And I could have broken. I could have wept. But that's not what women like me do. That's not what he taught me to do. So I stood, still as steel, as the eulogy began. They spoke of his valor, his discipline, his moral compass. They spoke of how he loved his family, his sons, his wife, his community. I was the ghost in the crowd, until the general passed me a small, engraved box. Velvet. Sealed. For you, he said, quietly. From David. Handwritten instructions. Last classified request. I opened it. Inside a single medal, the original silver star my father earned in '89, and a note, worn and small, folded in half, in his sharp, mechanical handwriting, for Eliza. I couldn't tell them what you did, but I always knew who you are. No one else had to. I couldn't breathe. Not in grief, not in rage, in recognition. You ever feel that quiet earthquake when someone who never said "I'm proud of you" finally sees you when the world doesn't need to hear it because the right person already knew I stood? Saluted the flag, and for the first time, I didn't feel like I was reclaiming anything. I was commanding it. The silence that followed wasn't rejection this time. It was respect. The kind that can't be faked, can't be undone. And still, I wonder, would they have ever known who I was if the Pentagon hadn't made them look? Would my name still be a secret in my own house? Would my story still be folded like that note hidden in velvet? Passed in silence. My boots didn't echo when I walked off that stage, not because the grass swallowed sound, but because no one dared speak. The audience shifted in their seats. I felt their stares scraping along the edges of my uniform. Their eyes didn't know where to land. On the rows of ribbons across my chest, on the silver oak leaves at my collar, or on the face of the woman they thought they had forgotten. A woman who didn't flinch, didn't wave, didn't smile. I moved with precision, not theater. That's something they never understood, that dignity doesn't need applause. They were used to spectacle. Loud voices, family dinners with too many toasts and not enough truth. But I had learned long ago silence commands more than noise. And now the very silence they once used to erase me turned against them. The military aide trailed behind me, carrying my documents, official invitation, protocols, deployment histories, all the things I shouldn't have needed to prove, but still carried. Because I knew who I was dealing with. You know that feeling, don't you? Carrying proof of your existence into a room that pretends you never lived there, like an emotional passport, stamped with every betrayal. My brother, Marcus, intercepted me near the side canopy, where dignitaries and close family were gathering for the private reception. His tie was crooked, always was. He used to joke that I was the uptight one, that I ironed discipline into my bloodstream, that I acted like the Marines had adopted me. They hadn't. I chose them. Marcus stood there, hands half shoved in his suit pockets, as if unsure if he wanted to shake my hand or accuse me of trespassing. Eliza, he said, as if the name belonged to someone else. Did you request the helicopter? I tilted my head. No. But they sent one? They did. He blinked, trying to hold my gaze, but it slipped, just like it used to when we were kids and I caught him lying to our parents. Except now, there were no parents to hide behind. Just truth. Clean. Bright. And sharp. Mom didn't know you were coming, he mumbled. She knew I might. I let the sentence hang. No need to rub it in. The RSVP was logged, encrypted, and relayed through a secure defense liaison. Whether she opened the email wasn't my concern. Marcus nodded slowly. Then, for a moment, I saw it, the hesitation, the wobble in his breath, the shadow of guilt. But he didn't reach for it, didn't name it. Instead, he said, "You should have told us what you've been doing. Maybe things would have been different." I wanted to laugh, or scream, or grab him by the collar and whisper, "You didn't want to know." But I didn't. Because that's what this day was built on: quiet restraint, silent corrections. "You never asked," I said instead. And then I walked past him. The reception was hosted in a domed rotunda just beyond the ceremonial green-white columns, silver-framed photographs of my father, service banners on each wall, high-ranking officers, local officials, veterans, all in full dress. It smelled like lemon polish and old pride. I didn't see my mother right away, but I felt her stiff, composed, always 5 degrees colder than the room. She stood near the portraits, sipping something clear and sour. Her gaze flicked toward me like a reflex, not a greeting. She didn't approach. I didn't either. Instead, a woman in Air Force blues came toward me, older, commanding, with a scar near her lip and wisdom in her eyes. Brigadier General Simmons. I'd worked with her in Northern Command. She didn't bother with pleasantries. "Hell of a moment." "Owens," she said. "You walked through that crowd like you owned the damn sky." I smirked. Didn't mean to. Didn't have to. That's what made it work. She touched my sleeve, not a correction, not maternal, just grounding. Then she lowered her voice and said, "I knew your father, back in Qatar. He was tough and proud, but he always talked about a daughter who understood silence better than most men understood orders. That you..." My throat closed. I nodded once. "Thought so?" And just like that, she moved on into the sea of handshakes and quiet memorial toasts. You know, people think power comes from speaking, from commanding a room, from giving speeches, from shouting orders. But real power, true power, is when the room rearranges itself to make space for you without a single word. And that's what happened. One by one, officers turned toward me, introduced themselves, called me commander, used my title with full formality. They didn't ask what my family thought. They didn't need to, because in this space, in this world, rank is earned, not inherited. And suddenly, my family's silence stopped mattering. Suddenly, my worth wasn't measured in childhood memories or Sunday dinners I missed. It was etched into the medals I wore, the missions I survived, the names on my commendations classified. Yes, but real. Still, there was one moment I wasn't ready for, when my mother walked up, slow and deliberate, like approaching a minefield. She didn't look at my ribbons, didn't glance at my collar. She just said, "You could have called." My mouth dried. "I did," I replied. "For years." Her jaw twitched. "We didn't know what to say to you anymore. After everything, after the deployments, the secrets, the distance. You didn't have to say anything," I whispered. "You just had to listen." We stood in the middle of the rotunda, 2 women from different worlds, bound by blood and something heavier. Regret, fear, pride, all balled into silence. Then she said, "He kept your letters." I froze. "In a drawer." She added, eyes wet now. "All of them." He never replied, but he read them, reread them. I looked down. Suddenly my uniform felt heavier, not from the fabric, from memory, from all the things I wanted him to say and now would never hear. "I thought he forgot me," I said. She shook her head. "He never did. He just didn't know how to explain you to the others." I wanted to ask what others, the ones who mocked my path. The ones who said I was too sharp, too strange, too cold. But I didn't. Because in that moment, I realized he hadn't needed to explain me. He'd trusted I would survive the silence. And I had. She reached into her clutch and pulled out a small photo creased, faded. Me, in uniform, overseas, desert behind me, eyes forward. He showed this to Marcus once, she said, handing it to me. Said, "That's what strength looks like." I held the photo like a relic, a truth I didn't know existed. My hands didn't tremble, I simply nodded, and in that moment, I knew I didn't need them to carry my name. I had carried it myself, through storms, through steel, through silence. You ever wonder what it takes to earn back the voice they tried to bury, to show up, when they tried to erase you, to stand still? While the sky salutes, the photo stayed in my pocket for the rest of the evening. I didn't look at it again. I didn't need to. It had already burned its shape into my palm, into something older than pride, older than pain, something like origin, like proof. The rest of the ceremony unfolded in formal waves, more speeches, more folded flags, a few controlled tears by wives who had played the public part for years, a slideshow with careful music, heroic chords, freeze-framed smiles, no shadows, no ghosts, no daughters in combat zones. I stood against the far wall near the exhibit of my father's medals, a curated legacy arranged in glass, Bronze Star, Silver Star, Army Commendation, a carefully folded photo of him in younger years, laughing on a base somewhere overseas, surrounded by men I never met. I watched as my cousins took photos in front of it like tourists. I watched as people who hadn't spoken to him in a decade whispered reverent things about duty and honor and legacy. They loved his memory, but they never loved what made him hard to love. That part, the private man, the distant father, the one who disappeared into silence after every tour that was buried deeper than the casket. And I was the only one who knew it. You know what it's like to love someone others only understand in costume. To remember the cracks in a war hero's armor not as weakness, but as the reason he kept going. That was my inheritance. Not the medals, not the house, but the silence between us, and the way we both carried it like a weapon we didn't speak of. A young lieutenant, fresh-faced, trembling, came up to me as I leaned near the glass. He couldn't have been older than 25. Commander Owens. I turned, expecting formality, protocol, maybe an escort out. But he just stood there, holding a sheet of paper in both hands. "I was instructed to give this to you in private." I raised a brow. "By whom?" He hesitated. "Your father, sir. He left instructions. Not formal military orders, but personal documentation. Handwritten." I reached out, took the page. His handwriting again. Stiff, slanted. I recognized the pen strokes. He always pressed too hard. Even his words had weight. The letter was short, direct. "Eliza, there are things I couldn't say in life without compromising what you built. But know this, I learned more from your silence than you ever knew. You fought battles I couldn't fight because mine were over. You carried what I buried. And that's why they salute you. That's why history won't forget." Dad. My mouth opened, but nothing came out. Not sorrow, not relief, just breath. A long, slow breath that had waited 30 years to leave my lungs. You ever have that moment where something you were never sure existed suddenly becomes undeniable? Not in fanfare, not in family reunions, just in truth, finally surfaced. I didn't cry. I folded the paper and slid it into the same pocket as the photo. 2 artifacts, 1 wound, and then, like instinct, I turned toward the exit. I didn't say goodbye, because this wasn't my goodbye. This was theirs. Outside. The sky was bruised with early twilight. I could smell the coming rain, the kind of storm that crept in soft, the kind we used to train under, because real-world operations didn't wait for clear skies. My boots found pavement, my spine reset. The weight of the uniform shifted from memory to mission again, and that's when I saw her. A girl, no older than 12, standing by the flagpole, alone. Her dress was too short for the chill in the air. Her hair pulled back like someone else had done it. A silver pin shaped like wings sat crooked on her chest. She looked up at me, and I saw it, the recognition. Not of me, of what I was. "You're the one they brought in the helicopter," she said. I paused. "Yes. They didn't clap for you." I crouched to her level. "They don't have to." Her brow furrowed. "But you were brave." I studied her. The tiny fists, the uncertain defiance in her voice. I knew that energy. I had been that energy. "What's your name?" I asked. "Kayla." "Who are you here for?" "My aunt. She flew planes." "Fighter." She nodded. F-16. She crashed in training. They said it wasn't her fault. But they didn't say much else. Did they? Her eyes narrowed. "No. Everyone keeps saying how strong she was, but they don't tell the stories. They just put her picture next to some flag." I felt that crack again in the same place where my voice used to live. I reached into my jacket, pulled out the folded photo. "This is me," I said, "on a base, in a place I can't name, after a mission no one will ever talk about." Her eyes widened. "But it happened. I survived. And I carried things no one ever saw. Like my aunt." I nodded. "Exactly." She looked at the picture again, then back at me. "They won't talk about her. They just say, 'She was a pilot.' That's it." I placed the photo in her hand. "She was more, and so are you. Don't let their silence tell you otherwise." She held it like it was glass. I stood, walked away. Because maybe that's the closest thing to legacy we get, passing the truth to someone who hasn't been broken by it yet. The Pentagon didn't send the helicopter for spectacle. They sent it because some rooms don't open until the ceiling hears you coming. They sent it because rank can silence 1,000 whispers. They sent it because a father knew what he couldn't say aloud, but made sure the world saw. And now, as the wind picked up and the first drops of rain kissed the brim of my hat, I felt it. Not vindication, not victory, just peace. Earned, not gifted. And in the distance, the faint sound of another helicopter, heading out, or maybe heading in. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. I was already on the list that mattered. The sound of rotor blades faded behind me, swallowed by the wind and the dusk. The crowd inside the rotunda would be dispersing soon, some clutching memories, others clinging to the comfort of uniformed myths. The carefully constructed version of my father would be folded away like the flag on his coffin. Clean, edgeless, revered. But the man I knew wasn't made of soft tributes. He was made of silence, of impossible expectations, of moments that stung deeper than orders barked across a training yard, and he had given me everything except a name at the table. Until now. I walked toward the perimeter gate, not rushed, not slow, the kind of walk you only learn from decades in command. Purpose wrapped in stillness, each step a message: I know exactly who I am. 2 Marines snapped to attention as I passed. They didn't know me personally. They didn't need to. The insignia did the speaking. The salutes were crisp, reverent. I returned the gesture without breaking stride. Out on the main road, my transport was already waiting. Not a car, not the helicopter again. Just a black government sedan with tinted windows and the kind of driver who doesn't ask questions. He stood by the door, his face unreadable. "Commander," he said, opening the back. I paused before entering, for the first time in hours. I looked back. not at the rotunda, not at the family still pretending to mourn a man they never really knew, but at the girl Kayla who now sat on the stone bench beneath the flagpole, holding that worn photo of me like it was sacred. Her gaze was far, beyond the ceremony, beyond the marble columns and manufactured grief. She was imagining something more, a story not yet written. And in that moment, I realized my legacy had nothing to do with my name appearing in the program. It had nothing to do with siblings who erased me or relatives who whispered that I was cold or difficult or gone too long. It had nothing to do with being invited. My presence was no longer a request. It was a fact. It had always been a fact buried under the polite cruelty of dismissal. But now it was flying over their heads. It was parked on the lawn in black steel. It was reflected in mirrored sunglasses of men who answered directly to the Joint Chiefs. It was in that girl's eyes. That was enough. As I lowered into the back seat, the driver closed the door and returned to his post. The city moved past my window in muted streaks of blue and gold, streetlights blooming like soft explosions as the rain finally came down in full. I didn't speak, didn't check my phone, didn't reach for anything. I just let it settle, the weight, the quiet, the strange stillness that comes after a lifetime war has been replaced by an absence. It wasn't peace. Not exactly. More like the moment after impact, when your ears are ringing and everything is blurry, but you know you survived. You ever feel that? That suspended second when the old version of you disappears, not because someone saved you, but because you stood through the fire and didn't scream. I lived there now. We pulled into a private tarmac. No fanfare. No flash. Just another bird waiting. Its engine humming low. The kind of aircraft not listed on flight trackers. The kind that leaves before questions are asked. The driver opened the door. I stepped out into the rain. There, beneath the shelter of the wing, a figure waited. Female. High-ranking. I didn't recognize her at first. Her back to me, posture relaxed, but then she turned. Director Alina Rice, Central Intelligence. I'd only been in a room with her twice before. Once for a black site handover in a neutral zone. Once at a closed-door debrief with a senator who didn't understand what classified meant. She didn't smile. "Walk with me," she said. We fell into step, side by side, rain slicing between us like static. "You made an impression today," she said eventually. "I wasn't invited. That's why it mattered." We moved past a row of quiet transport units. No crew nearby, just shadows and machines waiting for orders. "You understand the optics of today?" "Yes," she asked. I wasn't making a statement. "But you did." I didn't answer. She stopped walking and faced me. Her eyes weren't cold, just surgically precise, like she could see the version of me even I didn't admit existed. "Do you know why they sent the helicopter?" she asked. "Protocol," I assumed. "No," she said softly. "It was a message." I waited. "To your family." She let the words sit between us like a classified file no one dared open. "You don't need them to believe in you anymore," she continued. "They needed us to believe in you." And we did. Long before today. I swallowed hard. "Then why now?" "Because sometimes," she said, "silence has to be broken in public. That's the only way some people listen." She turned again. "Your father couldn't name your achievements, but he made damn sure you were seen. That note you received. He filed it with me 6 months ago. Handwritten, sealed. Requested full protocol activation if your RSVP was ignored." I stared at her, wind pulling at my coat. "You think he didn't want you there?" she added. "He designed this moment. Quietly, but completely." My chest caved not in collapse, but in release. Because all this time, I thought I'd shown up uninvited, but the truth was, I was always expected. He just knew the only way to prove my worth was to let the silence surround them and let me walk through it untouched. Director Rice reached into her inner pocket and pulled out a final envelope. Smaller than the last. Thinner. "This is the last of it," she said. "He requested this be handed to you only if you made it all the way through without breaking." I took it. Didn't open it yet. Didn't need to. I already knew what it would say. Not the words, but the shape. The unspoken pride of a father who could never say it in front of men, but knew deep down that his daughter had gone further than anyone in the bloodline before her. I looked back at the tarmac. The aircraft waited, but so did something else. Inside me, a stillness I had never known. Not in battle, not in briefings, but here in the aftermath of being erased and walking straight through the fire of it. You ever wonder if you were born just to prove a point, to show the very people who buried your voice that it was theirs that had gone silent, to step into a room where your name was forgotten and make it unforgettable? I didn't board the plane right away. I stood in the rain and opened the envelope. Inside a single line, typed this time, probably dictated. "She doesn't ask for permission. She walks where we only dream." Underneath it, the seal of the Department of Defense. And one more signature, my father's, Colonel David Owens, this time next to mine. Commander Eliza Owens, side by side. Finally, I boarded the plane without looking back. No ceremony, no goodbye, no one waving from the tarmac. The kind of exit I've always preferred: clean, quiet, without the weight of someone else's feelings clinging to my boots. Inside, the cabin hummed with the low buzz of classified air. No commercial clutter, no seat numbers, just utilitarian steel and stitched restraint. A lone steward nodded at me. "Commander Owens." I returned the nod, removed my coat, sat near the back where the windows were smaller and the silence louder. As the engines surged and the aircraft lifted, I felt it again, that shift. The kind that only happens at 30,000 feet when you're finally high enough to see the patterns. When all the things that used to crush you look like dots on the ground. I didn't think about my mother's face. I didn't think about Marcus and his excuses. I didn't even think about the rotunda or the salute or the photos they would probably post on social media, pretending to honor a man whose daughter they'd never mentioned. What I thought about was that 12-year-old girl Kayla sitting under the flagpole, clutching the photo of me, because that's what this was always about. Not proving I was worthy, but breaking the pattern. Women like me don't get written into the story. Not the real one. They'll name a school after a man who sat in an office for 20 years, but forget the woman who briefed 6 foreign governments under fire. They'll post flag emojis for fallen male soldiers, but whisper too aggressive about the women who came back alive. They'll remember our discipline, our medals, our silence, but not our names, and certainly not our stories, unless we force them to, unless we land the helicopter, unless we walk in, uninvited, and stand taller than their permission. You know that moment when you stop wanting their validation, when your dignity no longer bends toward their version of respect. That's where I live now, at cruising altitude. Beyond apology. The aircraft leveled. A screen unfolded from the ceiling, a secure channel. No entertainment, no news feed. Just a real-time map and a set of encrypted dispatches waiting for my eyes only. I keyed in my ID. A message blinked. Opportunity, immediate redeployment, level 9 classified. I didn't flinch. Didn't ask where. Didn't ask who. Because sometimes, when you've spent your whole life being told to stay in your place, the only answer left is to move forward before they can catch up. I tapped accept. A second later, a folder opened on the screen. Sparse briefing. Sparse team. Target unknown. Outcome essential. They'd chosen me again not because of politics, not because of family name, but because I'd done the job before when no one else could. That's the secret no one tells you about power. It doesn't arrive with applause. It comes in silence, in choices, in who they call when it matters. And this time, I was first on the list. You ever realize that the very things they mocked you for, the coldness, the formality, the distance, were the very things that kept you alive? The things they called unnatural in women were the same ones they decorated in men. But I kept them anyway. I learned to speak in clear orders, to walk without needing space cleared, to exist in rooms where everyone hoped I'd leave but no one dared ask me to. Because I didn't flinch. Not when they tried to erase me from the table. Not when they left me off the invite. Not even when my own father's obituary named every son, cousin, and golf partner, but left me as an invisible line between service and shame. That's what being a woman in the defense world is. You carry silence like armor. You carry shame that was never yours to begin with. You carry the weight of doing everything right and still being asked to wait outside. But I don't wait anymore. I take the mission. I fly the bird. I write my name in places they can't erase, and when the world doesn't clap, I keep walking. Because the world isn't the judge, the war is, and the war remembers. As we crossed over the coast, a soft vibration pulsed through the floor. Turbulence or weather? I couldn't tell, but it felt familiar. Like every covert landing I ever made, like the moment before the door drops and your boots hit soil you can't name out loud, like breath held in foreign wind. I leaned back, closed my eyes, and let the next chapter unfold. Not in memories, but in motion. Somewhere below us, a city pulsed with light weddings, funerals, promotions, betrayals. Somewhere, my family was returning to their homes, their stories, their tight circles of denial. Somewhere, Kayla might be looking at that photo, wondering who she would grow up to be. But up here, there was no doubt. I was exactly where I was meant to be. I remembered something my father once told me back when I was barely 20, before the first deployment that nearly broke me. He said, "The moment you need them to believe you, you've already lost." I didn't understand it then. I do now. Belief is a luxury. Command is a fact. So I carry myself like fact. No explanations. No softness where steel is needed. And when they ask why I never call, why I never beg to be invited, why I show up only when it matters most, I say nothing. Because I don't owe anyone a story. I am the story. You ever feel that shift? When the people who ignored you have to explain you? When the family who dismissed you is left out of the room where decisions are made? When the girl they said was too much becomes the woman in the room no one dares interrupt? That's not revenge. That's arrival. And now, they don't have to like it. They just have to live in the world I helped build. The screen dimmed. Final destination undisclosed. ETA was so 400. I buckled in tighter. Not because I was afraid, but because I was ready. Because the next time they ask where I've been, I won't answer. I'll let the silence speak. And it will say, she never needed permission. Only clearance. The aircraft descended before the sun even dared to rise. That hour between night and morning when even time itself seems unsure of who it answers to was always my favorite. That's when operations begin, when the unspoken is acted upon, when the people who live in the shadows come to life. We landed without a sound on a remote field, surrounded by steel buildings with no windows and signs no civilian would recognize. No welcome banner, no red carpet, just mission air. I stepped out. The cold hit immediately, wind slicing across the skin like truth. There was no need for small talk. The handler met me with a nod and a clipboard. You'll be debriefed inside. I nodded, followed. Each step on the tarmac felt surgical. Stripped of sentiment, Back to the clean lines of procedure, which I've always preferred. There's a kind of mercy in knowing exactly what's expected of you, unlike family, unlike grief. The building swallowed me whole concrete, metal, silence. Inside, everything moved with the fluid tension of urgent restraint. Low conversations, quick eyes, boots on polished floors, a war machine breathing through discipline. And then came the door, marked only with a symbol red circle, black slash. The kind you only see when the mission starts before briefing, when they're not just asking for your skill, they're asking for your signature on consequences you'll never be allowed to explain. The handler typed a code, opened the door, and stepped aside. Inside 2 chairs, 1 screen, a table with nothing on it but a sealed envelope, and a man I didn't expect. Rear Admiral Gates. He rose when I entered. I hadn't seen him since a naval tribunal 3 years ago, back when he said, to my face, that I was too precise to inspire loyalty. I saluted. He returned it. Formal. Nothing more. Commander Owens, he said, gesturing to the chair. Have a seat. I did. Slowly. Back straight. Hands on knees. He sat across from me, folded his hands, and studied me. Then, without fanfare, slid the envelope across the table. This is the mission. I picked it up, broke the seal, and scanned the contents. No location, no personnel, just an objective secure retrieval of compromised signals package from internal asset. Potential domestic breach. My eyes froze on one word. Internal. That changed everything. I looked up. He nodded. It's not foreign. It's not friendly. It's one of ours. And they want to go public. He paused. No. They already did. My pulse didn't spike. That's the thing about people like me. We're trained for the unbearable. But what I felt was deeper than adrenaline. It was betrayal. Do we know who he tapped the table once? That's why you're here. I folded the paper, slid it back into the envelope, and let my silence speak. You ever realize the final enemy was never out there? That the war you thought you were fighting overseas has already crept into your own house, that the name you carry, the one they ignored, erased, forgot wasn't just a burden, but a shield. I didn't speak again until he stood. He extended his hand. You'll be given full clearance. Shadow team. You lead. I took his hand. Brief. Measured. But before he turned away, I said, why me? He paused. Then, because you're not sentimental. Because you don't need them to like you. Because you don't hesitate. He left. And just like that, the silence returned. But it wasn't empty anymore. It was mine. They'd chosen me to protect something this country didn't even know it had lost yet. Because I wouldn't look away. Because I wouldn't ask for applause. Because they knew I wouldn't flinch even if the person I had to stop wore the same flag on their chest. That's the curse of women like me. We're never remembered for how much we love, only for how hard we fight. And still, we fight. I exited the building, back into wind and warning. The sun was just beginning to stain the horizon with pale orange, like a bloodless wound. It reminded me of mornings overseas, too quiet, too honest, too aware. A soldier stepped toward me with a case. Suit-up kit. Commander. I took it without a word. Inside, I knew I'd find everything I needed: new comms, tactical ID, encrypted data unit, orders locked to biometric scan, tools of the trade, tools I've earned. But what I carry, no one issues. I carry the silence of being forgotten, the echo of my name omitted from invites, the burn of sitting at empty tables while they passed photos around photos I wasn't in, stories I wasn't part of, memories they edited me out of with surgical precision. But I also carry something else now, a legacy reclaimed, not through apology, not through family hugs, but through clarity. You ever feel that when clarity becomes your only family, when you stop seeking love in their eyes and start finding it in your own reflection? I geared up in the prep room, alone, pulled my hair back, strapped the vest tight, checked each piece twice. By the time I looked in the mirror, I saw her again, the woman they tried to leave out, the girl they forgot to name, the daughter who didn't fit their stories. But she fit here, perfectly. A knock came at the door. "Commander, transport's ready." I turned, collected my gear, walked out. The hum of the vehicle met me like a heartbeat. I stepped inside, placed the case on the floor, and let the door close behind me. No briefing, no hesitation, just a name, a code, a route, and me. You know the real difference between family and command. Family needs to be reminded. Command never forgets. As the vehicle moved forward, I watched the road unfold, black asphalt disappearing under wheels that don't turn around. This time, there was no funeral, no seating list, no mother's tight mouth or brother's clumsy guilt. Just the mission. And me, the one they didn't invite, the one who came anyway. Because I didn't need their permission. I already had the clearance. And now they don't get to write me out again. Because I'm the one holding the pen. There's a moment right before you breach a room when the whole world goes quiet. Not silent like peace. Silent like tension pulled so tight it could slice through bone. Your pulse doesn't quicken. Your breath doesn't stutter. Everything slows, narrows, becomes clean. That's where I lived now. The target was a facility buried beneath layers of plausible deniability. No signage, no insignia, just a long hallway beneath an old intelligence annex in Arlington. On paper, it was storage. In practice, a vault for the kinds of secrets that turn allies into liabilities. And tonight, one of our own had tried to walk something out. I was already in position, not with a team, alone. Just me and a thin biometric scanner under my thumb. One scan, one breath, door open, inside gray light, a steel table, one chair, and the asset. She turned slowly when I entered. Civilian clothing, black turtleneck, blonde hair pulled back, not armed, not restrained, but familiar, very familiar. "Hello, Commander," she said, softly. I closed the door behind me. She smiled. "Didn't think they'd send you." I stared at her, hard. "Didn't think you'd turn." She didn't flinch. I didn't turn. I revealed. I crossed the room, placed the dossier in front of her. The evidence was clean fingerprints, time logs, data trails, not open to interpretation. She glanced at it and pushed it away. They buried the truth for decades. I just dug it up. "You leaked intel," I said. "That makes you a threat." To what she asked. Tone sharp now. "To your father's generation, to all the secrets men like him left behind." And suddenly, I understood. This wasn't just a breach. It was a reckoning. "You think I owe them silence?" she asked, voice tightening. "They used us. Used you. Sent us on missions they'd never admit happened, then erased us from the record." I didn't answer. Not because she was wrong, but because she was right. And still she was dangerous. "You signed the same oath I did," I said. "You knew the cost." She stood, slowly. "No. I paid the cost. While they pinned medals on men who didn't know the first thing about sacrifice, we stood there eye to eye, woman to woman, soldier to ghost. And for a moment, I wasn't sure which side I was on. You ever face someone who mirrors everything they tried to silence in you? Someone who speaks the words you were trained never to say I had. And she was standing 3 feet in front of me. I stepped forward, close enough to feel the heat of her breath. "I didn't come here to argue ethics," I said quietly. "I came to stop a leak." She laughed, soft, broken. Of course you did. She reached into her pocket slowly, deliberately, and pulled out a small drive. No resistance. No games. She handed it over. I wanted you to be the one. Why? Because you're the only one who still knows what it means to be forgotten. I took the drive, slid it into the inner pocket of my jacket. Then I said, "You know what happens now?" She nodded. "I'm not afraid." I opened the door and gestured. She walked out on her own. No cuffs, no shame, just silence. Again. But this time, it was a different kind of silence. Not one handed to us by men who didn't want to hear our names, not one sewn into ceremonies that forgot to mention we existed. This one was deliberate. This one belonged to us. Back at the debriefing, no one spoke about what happened in that room. They didn't ask if I hesitated, didn't ask why she handed it over, didn't ask what she said. They knew better. Because in this world there are only two kinds of power, the one they give you, and the one you take when they forget you were there. And I took it. On the tarmac. The helicopter waited again. Same blades. Same wind. But this time, I wasn't arriving. I was leaving. And not just the building. Not just the case. But everything that came before. The need to be seen. The ache of not being invited. The part of me that kept whispering, maybe if they had known who I was. I stepped into the chopper, sat straight. No emotion. But everything had changed. Because this wasn't about revenge. Not anymore. This was about recognition. Not from them. From me. I remembered the photo, the letter, the final signature. I thought about my father's medals, locked behind glass. I thought about the seat that was never set for me at the table. And then I thought about the funeral, and how I stood when they sat, how I walked when they looked away, how the only name that mattered was mine. You ever feel that? When you realize you don't need to reclaim what was taken, because you've built something no one can touch. That's what freedom is. Not forgiveness, not even legacy, just the absence of need. As we lifted into the sky, I could see the city below small, glittering, distant, like a childhood I no longer belonged to, like a memory I'd already outgrown. And then I smiled. Not for the mission, not for the medal, for the moment they finally had to say my name. Commander Eliza Owens, the daughter they didn't invite, the officer they couldn't erase, the woman who walked in anyway. And when the world looked away, she made them look back. Because now, I didn't need them to respect me. The whole damn country already did.